The first thing I heard that morning was the scream of a chainsaw. It was 7:08 a.m. I was standing in my kitchen, holding a cup of coffee, when the sound ripped through the quiet of my house. At first, I thought one of the neighbors was trimming branches near the street. Then I looked out the window and saw 3 workers in orange vests standing inside my yard. One of them had a chainsaw pressed against the lowest limb of my 40-year-old oak tree. My oak tree. I ran outside barefoot and shouted, "Stop! You do not have permission to be here." The worker lowered the saw for half a second, confused. Before he could answer, a cold voice came from the sidewalk. "Keep going."
You have no right
Linda
to be on
Markham,
my property.
the HOA
Proceed with the
president,
removal.
was standing at the curb with sunglasses on and a clipboard tucked under her arm. She looked calm, almost bored, like she had every right to send strangers into my fenced yard before breakfast. I walked toward her, shaking with anger. "That tree is on my property." Linda pointed one finger at my face. "You were warned. The board approved removal. That tree violates community appearance standards." "No," I said. "You approved nothing. I never signed anything." She smiled like I was too stupid to understand my own neighborhood. "When you bought here, you agreed to follow the rules." Behind me, a branch cracked. A heavy limb dropped from the oak and slammed into the fence my father had helped me repair before he died. 2 cedar boards split in half. For a second, I could not speak. Linda stepped closer and said, "If you interfere with these workers, I'll have you fined again. And if necessary, I'll call the sheriff." That was the moment I almost lost control. Almost. Because while Linda stood there acting like she owned my yard, my doorbell camera was recording every word. My side camera was recording every worker. And 1 week later, a certified arborist would stand beside the stump of that tree and put a number on what Linda had destroyed. $52,000. By the time the HOA understood that my oak was not just landscaping, it was already too late. I was never the kind of person who wanted a fight with an HOA. I paid my dues on time. I kept my trash cans behind the gate. I trimmed my hedges, mowed my lawn, and stayed out of neighborhood drama. I did not go to meetings looking for arguments. I did not post angry comments online. I just wanted a quiet life in the house I had worked years to afford. The house was not fancy. It was a simple 2-story home on a corner lot outside Raleigh, North Carolina, with faded brick, white shutters, and a backyard just big enough for a small garden, a grill, and the old oak tree that made me fall in love with the place. The previous owner told me the oak had been planted about 40 years earlier. It stood just inside the left side of my property, wide enough to shade the porch in summer and strong enough that the whole yard seemed built around it. In fall, the grass disappeared under copper leaves. In winter, the bare branches stretched over the driveway like old arms. My father loved that tree too. He was already sick when I bought the house, but he still came over with his toolbox and helped me repair the fence behind it. One Saturday, we replaced broken cedar boards near the trunk, and he joked that the tree was probably stronger than the house. Later, he helped me hang a small wooden swing from one of the lower limbs for my niece. After he passed, I could not look at that branch without seeing him standing there in his old denim jacket, one hand on the rope, smiling like he still had all the time in the world. So when the HOA started complaining about the tree, it was not just about leaves. At first, the emails sounded harmless. One said the oak dropped excessive seasonal debris. Another said the branches created visual imbalance along the street. Then came one claiming the tree affected the uniform appearance of the community. I thought it was ridiculous, but I tried to be reasonable. I hired a tree company to trim dead twigs, clear branches away from the sidewalk, and check the tree's health. They found no danger. I sent the receipt and photos to the HOA. They never thanked me. They just went quiet. Because the tree was inside my fence, inside my property line, and clearly shown on my survey, I thought the issue was over. I was wrong. If you have ever had an HOA, a neighbor, or a board member act like your private property somehow belongs to them, leave your thoughts in the comments, because sometimes the first warning is not a threat. Sometimes it is a polite little email that turns into something much worse. For me, the real warning came on a Friday afternoon. I got home from work and found a bright yellow notice taped to my front door. At the top, in bold letters, it said, "Final notice of noncompliance." By the time I finished reading it, my stomach had gone cold. The notice said my oak tree violated the HOA's community appearance standards because it created excessive leaf accumulation, visual obstruction, and inconsistent curb presentation. It gave me 10 days to remove the tree, grind the stump, restore the lawn, and send photos proving the work was done. At the bottom, it said failure to comply could result in fines, contractor intervention, and all costs being charged to my homeowner account.
Contracteur intervention.
That was the phrase that made me read the page again. They were not just asking me to trim the tree anymore. They were claiming they could send workers onto my property and remove it themselves. That same night, I emailed the HOA management company and asked for 3 things. The exact bylaw that allowed them to remove a healthy tree from private property, the inspection report proving the tree was dangerous, and written authority allowing contractors inside my fenced yard without my signature. 2 days later, Linda replied. She answered none of it. She wrote, "The board has reviewed this matter extensively. Your continued refusal to comply is disruptive to the community. The oak must be removed. No rule citation. No arborist report. No county notice. Just an order." I replied with my survey, my trimming receipt, and photos showing the oak was healthy and maintained. For a week, nobody responded. Then the fines started. $500 for landscape noncompliance. Another $500 for failure to complete corrective action. Then a warning that unpaid fines could lead to a lien against my home. That was when Linda showed up at my house with 2 board members. She walked up my driveway holding a folder and said, "You're making this much harder than it needs to be." I asked again for the rule giving her authority to remove my tree. She smiled. "Community appearance standards. That does not let you destroy private property," I said. Her smile disappeared. "This is not destruction. This is maintenance. Your refusal to maintain that eyesore is affecting the entire street." I looked back at the oak. The evening sun was shining through the leaves. It was full, healthy, and beautiful. Maybe it was not manicured like Linda's little ornamental trees, but it was alive, strong, older than half the houses in the subdivision. "It's not an eyesore," I said. "It's a 40-year-old oak." Linda gave a short laugh. "It's a tree, and you are acting like we bulldozed your house." Then she handed me the folder. Inside was an estimate from a tree service company. The total was $3,800. The description said, "Complete oak removal, stump grinding, debris hauling." I told her clearly that nobody had permission to enter my yard or cut anything. She leaned closer and said, "Go ahead and fight it. Attorneys are expensive, and HOA liens are very real. Most homeowners figure that out too late." For days later, the chainsaw started. When I ran outside, the workers were already inside my fence. Linda stood on the sidewalk and told them the HOA had authorized the work. One worker asked if she had my signature. She held up a paper with only her own signature on it. "That means nothing," I said. Linda raised her voice. "Take the whole thing down." The homeowner had enough warnings. So I did the only smart thing I could do. I did not grab the saw. I did not block the workers. I did not give Linda a reason to call me unstable. I recorded. My phone recorded. My doorbell camera recorded. My side camera recorded. By noon, the oak that had shaded my home for years was nothing but a raw stump surrounded by sawdust. The fence was broken, the flower bed was crushed, and the yard looked empty in a way that felt personal. Before the crew left, one worker handed me a job sheet and said quietly, "I'm sorry. We were told this was HOA property." The customer listed was the HOA. The service location was my address. The authorization line had Linda Markham's name. 2 days later, the final insult arrived. The HOA added a $3,800 corrective maintenance assessment to my account. They cut down my tree without permission. They damaged my fence. They left a stump in my yard. And then they tried to make me pay for it. That was when I opened a folder on my computer and named it Oak Tree Evidence. I did not sleep much that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard the chainsaw again. I saw the branch hit the fence. I saw Linda on the sidewalk, calm and proud, as if destroying something that belonged to me was just another agenda item. But by morning, I made myself one promise. I was not going to give Linda the reaction she wanted. People like her know how to turn anger into evidence against you. One raised voice, one careless message, one angry scene in the street, and suddenly the story becomes about your behavior instead of what they did. So I got quiet, and I got organized. I saved every email as a PDF. I printed the yellow notice, the fines, the lien warning, the tree removal estimate, and the final invoice. I downloaded the doorbell footage and the side camera footage. That footage changed everything. It showed me telling the workers they did not have permission. It showed the worker asking Linda for authorization. It showed Linda holding up a paper with her signature. And it captured her saying, clearly, "Take the whole thing down." The homeowner had enough warnings. Then I pulled my closing documents from a file cabinet and spread the survey across my dining room table. The oak was inside my property line. Not near the line. Not in a gray area. Inside. There was no easement over that part of the yard. No common area. No drainage access. Nothing that gave the HOA any obvious right to enter. Still, I wanted more than an old survey. I called a licensed surveyor and explained what happened. 3 days later, he came out, checked the pins, measured the lot, and marked the boundary with flags. When he finished, he stood near the stump and said, "This tree was clearly on your property." I asked him to put it in writing. He said he would. Next, I called the county clerk and asked whether any permit had been pulled for tree removal at my address. After being transferred to planning and inspections, I learned something important. In my area, removing certain mature trees could require review if the tree met size thresholds or affected drainage, canopy coverage, or landscape conditions tied to the subdivision approval. The county employee could not give legal advice, but she said, "If this was a large, healthy oak, you may want to speak with code enforcement and a certified arborist." Certified arborist. I wrote those words down. The arborist who finally came out was named Daniel Reeves. He measured the stump, studied the growth rings, checked the cut surface, looked for rot, disease, insects, or signs of structural failure. Then he reviewed old photos from my yard, the real estate listing, and the receipt from the tree company that had trimmed it months earlier. He did not rush. After nearly an hour, he said, "This was a significant mature oak. It was not a disposable shrub." I asked what that meant. "It means it had measurable value," he said. "Replacement value, landscape value, shade value, and property impact. If it was removed without permission, that matters." For the first time since the chainsaw started, I felt the ground shift. Linda had treated the oak like a nuisance. Daniel was treating it like a real property asset. He prepared a formal valuation report. It included the tree species, approximate age, stump diameter, location, condition, photos, and professional appraisal methods. When the PDF arrived a few days later, I opened it in my kitchen. I scrolled past the measurements, the condition notes, and the photos. Then I reached the final page. At the bottom, in bold type, was the appraised value, $52,000. I read it twice. $52,000 for the tree Linda had called an eyesore. $52,000 for the tree she ordered workers to cut down. $52,000 for the living part of my property the HOA destroyed, then billed me $3,800 to remove. That was the moment this stopped being a neighborhood argument. It became a property damage claim. And Linda had handed me almost all the evidence herself. The first attorney I called asked one question before I even finished the story. "Do you have video?" "Yes," I said. "Do you have the survey?" "Yes." "Do you have the arborist report?" "Yes." His voice changed. "Do not talk to the HOA directly anymore. Everything goes through writing from this point forward." His name was Michael Grant, and he handled property disputes and HOA conflicts. When I brought the documents to his office, I expected him to warn me that HOAs are hard to fight. Instead, he watched the video twice, read the notices, reviewed the survey, and leaned back in his chair. This is not a normal enforcement issue, he said. He separated the documents into piles. HOA notices, my responses, the invoice, the survey, the arborist report, the camera footage, and the tree service job sheet. Then he tapped the bylaws with his pen. They can enforce appearance standards, he said. They can require maintenance if the rules support it. But that does not automatically give them the right to enter private property, remove a healthy tree, and bill you afterward. He pointed out 3 major problems. First, the tree was on my private property. The new survey confirmed it was several feet inside my lot. Second, I never gave consent. Linda's signature did not replace mine. An HOA president does not become the owner of someone else's yard just because she has a title. Third, the HOA had not followed its own process. The bylaws required notice and a chance for a hearing before major corrective action, unless there was an emergency. There was no hearing, no emergency arborist report, no county order, no proof the tree was dangerous. Then Michael pointed to the invoice and said, "This is one of the worst things they did." I thought he meant the amount. He shook his head.
No.
It proves they arranged the removal and billed it to you. They connected themselves directly to the damage. Then he played the camera clip again. My voice. "You do not have permission to be here." The worker. "Do you have her signature?" Linda. "I have authorization." Then the sentence that mattered most. "Take the whole thing down." The homeowner had enough warnings. Michael paused the video. "That shows intent," he said. Linda could not claim the contractor misunderstood. She could not claim she did not know I objected. She was standing there after I said no, telling them to keep cutting. Michael drafted a demand letter. It identified the property, attached the surveys, described the removal, included the arborist valuation, cited the HOA's failure to provide a hearing, and demanded that the association preserve all records. Emails, texts, board minutes, contractor communications, invoices, and insurance documents. It demanded cancellation of the $3,800 assessment, removal of all fines, repair of my fence and yard, reimbursement of costs, legal fees, and compensation for the value of the oak. The letter went to the HOA management company, the board, their registered agent, and the insurance carrier. 3 days later, the invoice vanished from my online account.
No epalegi. No explanation.
Just gone. That told me the demand letter had scared them. But Linda could not stop herself. The following Monday, she sent a community-wide email about misinformation and said certain residents were trying to weaponize technicalities to avoid responsibility. Technicalities. My deed was not a technicality. My property line was not a technicality. My refusal to sign away my rights was not a technicality. A 40-year-old oak reduced to a stump was not a technicality. I forwarded the email to Michael. His reply was simple. "Good. She is still creating evidence." Then the county called. A code enforcement inspector named Marissa wanted to inspect the stump, check the location, and compare the removal to county records. When she arrived, she photographed the stump, measured it, reviewed the survey markers, and looked at the arborist report. After 20 minutes, she asked, "Who pulled the permit?" "As far as I know," I said. "Nobody." A week later, the preliminary county response came back. No permit had been issued. No hazard exemption had been filed. No emergency removal had been documented. And the original subdivision approval included landscape preservation conditions for certain mature trees near corner lots because of canopy coverage and drainage stability. That was the detail Linda never checked. She had treated the oak like decoration. The county treated it like regulated landscape infrastructure. Now the HOA was not just facing me. They were facing a county review, an insurance claim, a legal demand, a certified arborist report, survey evidence, and video of their president giving the order. The next HOA meeting was scheduled for Thursday night. Linda expected to control the room. She had no idea my attorney would be there. The clubhouse was packed that Thursday. Usually, HOA meetings had 10 people, maybe 15. That night, almost every chair was full. Neighbors had seen the chainsaws. They had seen the stump. They had seen Linda's vague email about misinformation, and vague emails make people curious. Linda sat at the front table like she always did, with her nameplate in front of her. Greg sat beside her, staring down at his papers. Susan, another board member, looked nervous before the meeting even started. Michael sat next to me in the front row with a folder in his lap. Linda tried to rush through the agenda. Pool maintenance, treasurer's report, landscaping updates, anything except the oak. Then an older man in the back raised his hand. Are we going to talk about the tree? The room went silent. Linda forced a smile. The board does not discuss individual enforcement matters in open session. Michael stood calmly. My client is willing to discuss the facts in open session, especially since the HOA president sent a community-wide email referencing the matter. People turned toward Linda. She said, "This is not a courtroom."
No, Michael replied.
But homeowners have a right to understand potential liability created by board action. Liability. That word changed the room. Michael did not shout. He simply laid out the facts. The tree was several feet inside my private property line. I had not signed authorization. The HOA had not produced a hazard report. I had not been given a hearing. The HOA had arranged the work and billed my account afterward. Then he read the Arborist valuation. When he said $52,000, people started whispering. Linda snapped, "That number is absurd." Michael looked at her and said, "Then the association should have obtained its own expert evaluation before ordering removal." She had no answer. Then Michael played the video. Not all of it, just the part that mattered. My voice came through the speaker. "You do not have permission to be here." The worker asked, "Do you have her signature?" Then Linda's voice, "Take the whole thing down." The homeowner had enough warnings. Nobody moved. There was no way to spin it. No way to call it a misunderstanding. She had been told no, and she ordered them to continue. A homeowner in the second row stood up. "Did our board president authorize workers to enter private property after the owner objected?" Linda said, "That is not an accurate characterization." Michael said, "The video speaks for itself." After that, the meeting slipped out of Linda's control. Homeowners asked whether the board had voted, whether association money had been used, whether insurance would cover the claim, whether dues would increase, whether anyone checked the permit requirements, whether Linda had exposed the entire neighborhood to liability over a tree that was not even on HOA land. The next morning, Marissa from Code Enforcement came back to my house with another inspector. Linda appeared on the sidewalk within 10 minutes, but this time she did not step into my yard. Marissa asked her for the permit number. Linda said the contractor handled permits. Marissa asked for the hazard documentation. Linda said there had been complaints. Marissa looked at her and said, "Complaints are not hazard documentation. I will remember that sentence for the rest of my life. Complaints are not hazard documentation." Cut through months of HOA language in 5 words. The county opened a formal review. The tree service company turned over emails from Linda asking them to remove the non-compliant oak at my address. One email said, "The board has authority to proceed if the owner refuses." There it was again. Proof. Not rumor. Not emotion. Her own words. After that, the fines disappeared from my account. The HOA management company stopped sending notices. Their insurance carrier appointed an adjuster. Their attorney contacted Michael directly. A week earlier, Linda had threatened to call the sheriff on me. Now she had county inspectors asking for permits, an insurance company reviewing a $52,000 claim, a contractor trying to distance itself, and homeowners questioning whether she should remain president. The woman who acted like the rules belonged to her was suddenly surrounded by people who actually knew how rules worked. And none of them were impressed by her title. The settlement did not happen overnight. Legal accountability rarely feels like a movie scene. There was no judge slamming a gavel the next day.
No dramatique palegi.
No moment where Linda stood in my yard and admitted she was wrong. People like Linda do not usually apologize. They negotiate. The HOA's insurance carrier first argued that the arborist valuation was too high. They said a replacement sapling would cost far less than $52,000. Michael pushed back immediately. A sapling was not a 40-year-old oak. It would not replace decades of shade, landscape value, stormwater benefit, curb appeal, or the character of the property. Then they tried to separate the HOA from Linda's decision, suggesting she may have exceeded her authority. Michael answered with the board notices, the fines, the invoice, the work order, and the emails showing the HOA had treated her decision as official enforcement. They could not have it both ways. Either Linda had authority, which made the HOA responsible, or she had no authority, which meant she used her title to order destruction of private property while the board failed to stop her. Neither version helped them. After weeks of emails, insurance review, and legal pressure, the HOA's insurer agreed to a substantial settlement based on the Arborist valuation, property damage, broken fence, cleanup costs, legal fees, and loss of use and enjoyment. The $3,800 assessment was permanently canceled. Every fine connected to the oak was removed. The HOA paid to repair the fence, restore the damaged lawn, replace the gate hardware, and plant new trees selected with my arborist, not theirs. The county also issued a violation notice tied to the unpermitted removal and required the association to submit a corrective landscape plan. The HOA had to update its enforcement policy so no contractor could enter private property for corrective work without documented owner consent, legal review, and permit confirmation. That mattered, because my oak was gone. Nothing could bring it back. But maybe the next homeowner would not wake up to a chainsaw because one board president decided curb appeal mattered more than property rights. At the next annual meeting, Linda tried to keep her seat. She lost, not by a little, by enough that even the board looked shocked. Homeowners who had stayed silent for years finally showed up. They asked for enforcement letters to be reviewed. They demanded clearer rules. They wanted to know why one person had been allowed to expose the association to a major claim over a tree that was not on HOA land. Susan resigned the following week. Greg stayed only after admitting publicly that the board failed to verify its authority before approving enforcement action. The management company assigned a new representative, and the new board hired outside counsel to review the governing documents. As for my yard, it still looked wrong. The first summer without the oak was brutal. The porch was hotter. The front rooms stayed bright and exposed. The young replacement trees were beautiful, but thin and small, held up by stakes, their leaves trembling in the wind. One Saturday, my niece came over. She walked to the corner of the yard where the old swing used to hang and said, "It feels weird without it." I nodded. "Yeah, it does." She looked at the new trees and asked if one of them would ever be big enough for a swing. I told her maybe someday. That was the closest thing to closure I got. Not the settlement. Not Linda losing her seat. Not the county notice. It was realizing that the HOA had taken the tree, but they had not taken my home. They had not taken my rights. They had not taken my ability to stand up the right way. Because that is the lesson I learned. You do not beat people like Linda by yelling louder. You beat them by slowing down when they want you emotional. You save every email, every notice, every invoice, every video clip, every survey, every photo, every receipt. You learn where your property line is. You read what your bylaws actually say. You ask for the permit. You call the county. You get the expert report. Linda had a clipboard. I had proof. And proof won. My 40-year-old oak tree is gone. But the people who cut it down learned exactly what it was worth. If this story made you think differently about HOA power, property rights, or the importance of keeping evidence, leave your thoughts in the comments. Share it with someone who owns a home, deals with an HOA, or has ever been pressured into backing down when they knew something was wrong. And subscribe for more stories where ordinary homeowners fight back legally, calmly, and intelligently.